Hello folks, this is Mr. O'Brien and welcome to the video quiz for Andrew Jackson's Bank War of 1833. So this video quiz will serve in the immediate sense about the Bank War, but also about the wider issues between Democrats and the Republicans/Whigs, and also will serve as kind of a coda, which is a fancy SAT word for kind of a conclusion to Andrew Jackson, because we're getting close to the end here. So let's look at the notes underneath this first slide. Andrew Jackson was a man of contradictions, to put it lightly. He was not well educated, but he was eloquent. He was articulate. He championed the common man, but excluded Indians and African Americans from democracy. Contradiction. He rose from modest origins to become a rich man and slave owner in Tennessee. He married rich. His wife's father was a land speculator. He disliked banks, paper money, and some of the result of the market revolution. He was a strong nationalist who believed that states, not the federal government, should govern, yet he, in some of his actions during his presidency, he sided with the nation over the states. And he opposed federal intervention in the economy or interference in private life. By Jackson's presidency, politics was a mass activity, engaging masses of Americans constantly and penetrating all spheres of life. So presidential politics was more national, involved more of the common people than prior to Andrew Jackson. Remember, he didn't cause this, but he benefited from the de-elitification of D.C. It was a mass spectacle, politics was, with enormous meetings, party newspapers, parades, celebrated political, the celebrated politician orator, the speaker. Large national conventions replaced congressional caucuses to nominate candidates. Congress used to choose them, now the people chose them in primaries. Political parties and urban political machines dispensed patronage in the form of jobs, the spoil system, giving out jobs in exchange for helping to get elected. Jackson himself introduced the spoil system, in which a new administration replaced previously appointed officials with its own party appointees, which we still do. Alright, so let's get specifically to the Bank War, renewing the charter of the Second National Bank. Let's look at the notes. The Second Bank of the U.S., the Second Bus, was created by Congress in 1816, Madison, with the support of President Madison. I keep stealing my own thunder here. Also, you need to remember that in the first half of the 19th century, paper money promised to pay the bearer on demand a specific amount of gold or silver. So technically, you're supposed to be able to go to the bank with a paper currency and demand that equivalent amount in a precious metal, gold or silver. If it was backed by gold or silver, if there was enough to back it up, it was called specie or hard money. If the bank did not have enough to back it up, it was called soft money. So money that was not backed by either of the precious metals is considered soft money. Paper money that is backed up by a precious metal is hard money or specie. Moving on. Alright, the national bank debate. So we have Nicholas Biddle, who was the president of the bus, an arrogant aristocrat from Philly, versus Andrew Jackson. Let's look at the notes. The most significant political fight of the Jacksonian era was Jackson's campaign against the Second Bus, which to many represented the hopes and worries caused by the market revolution. So some of the worries, not only were we worried that we were becoming too commercially oriented, i.e. Less moral, less, commercialization was becoming the focus, not being virtuous, but we were moving to the cities instead of the towns. It was a city of strangers who didn't know everybody, and we were also concerned that we were now becoming vulnerable to market fluctuations. Farmers were no longer, they were increasingly moving from the moral into the cash economy, which made them vulnerable to the ups and downs of the market. Alright, so we were concerned. So while banking's growth had spurred economic development, many distrusted bankers as what was called non-producers. They didn't make anything of value, who gave nothing to the nation's real wealth in the eyes of these critics and profited from the labor of others. Banks also state banks and private local banks tended to over-issue paper money, soft money, whose deterioration in value reduced the real income of wage earners. So inflation went up, so the money you made felt like less. It had less purchasing power during this market revolution when the banks gave out these soft money loans, similar to banks giving out mortgages too easy easily in the early 21st century that wound up helping to cause the recession, the Great Recession of '07, '08, and so on. Jackson and others now thought that, quote, hard money, gold and silver, was the only honest currency. The aristocratic Nicholas Biddle directed the bus, and he celebrated the bank's power to control America's financial system. This alarmed Democrats. In 1832, Biddle's allies persuaded Congress to extend the bus's charter for another 20 years, even though it was set to expire in 1836. To make a long story short, Henry Clay, who's still trying to become president, thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get Nicholas Biddle to seek early renewal for the second bus. Jackson will veto it. It will be so unpopular that he will lose the election in 1832. So Biddle, took the bait, sought early renewal. Jackson saw this as blackmail. All right, since he believed the bus would use its resources to defeat him in the 1832 election if he vetoed the bill. He did veto it, and his veto message resonated with popular values. He won the election largely because of the bank veto. And he viewed this win, this electoral victory, as vindication. See, I can crush the bank. All right, so in 1832, he vetoes the renewal. He wins the election, but the bank could still have been renewed in 1836. So he then moves to crush the bank even before the charter expires in 1836, the Bank War. He stated that Congress could not create an institution with such power and economic privilege unaccountable to voters. They were not accountable to the public. They were not elected. And to Jackson, and he was well ahead of his time on this. This is probably the best thing in my view, you can say about him. He was well ahead of his time warning about the influence that a big business, a big, powerful financial institution would have on our democracy. And he viewed the bank as somewhat of like an evil corporation that was having too much kind of behind the closed doors control of our government. Again, well ahead of his time. So exclusive privileges like the bus charter widened the gap between the wealthy and the humble farmers. That's a fact. Between, mechanics, meaning hand workers, artisans, and laborers, wage earners, whom Jackson claimed to defend. The bank war allowed Jackson to enhance the power of the presidency. He was the first president to use the veto as a major weapon and directly address voters over the heads of Congress. He was the first president to claim he was the voice of the people, not Congress. So Jackson's re-election in 1832 over Whig candidate Henry Clay assured the demise of the bus. All right, so that was somewhat of an overview. Let's get into a little bit more depth. All right, so you have soft money versus hard money here. Soft money versus specie. All right. On one hand, state bankers felt that government regulation, this national bank that was intended to keep them from giving out too many soft money loans, state bankers felt it restrained their banks from issuing banknotes freely enough. All right. They argued that it inhibited economic growth and speculation, which they thought was a good thing, the speculation being a good thing, buying low and selling high. The hard money people felt that coin was the only safe currency. They did not like any bank that issued banknotes, meaning soft money. They were suspicious of expansion and speculation. So in the 1830s, Andrew Jackson believed all the following about the second bank, and remember this. He believed that bankers, as I said, were non-producers who profited off the labor of others, did not make anything themselves. He believed the bank received exclusive privileges that widened the gap between the wealthy and the humble. He believed the bank was a monster that illegitimately combined political and economic power, and he believed the bank was engaging in a form of political blackmail against him. All right, so he crushes the bank, the monster is destroyed, quoting him, and he vetoes the bill, and now he's out to crush the monster. So he convinces his Secretary of Treasury, and he had to go through about 3 or 4 of them because they were refusing to do it, and finally Roger Taney, who was kind of the 3rd or 4th hiree for Secretary of Treasury, agreed to do it. He drained the National Bank of funds, and he deposited the money into Jackson's kind of friend banks, his buddies who ran state-level banks, and they became known as his pet banks. All right, so in 1832, he vetoed the extension of the bus, In 1836, the charter expires. By 1841, the bank was bankrupt. All right, so Jackson had taken all the money out and deposited the money into his local pet banks. All right, and this is a political cartoon showing the downfall of Mother Bank. You see the bankers with kind of devil horns as their institutions crumble. Okay, and Jackson kind of holding up the veto that will crush them. All right.